Good morning. My name is Jumaina Siddiqui. I am the Senior Program Officer for South Asia at the United States Institute of Peace. I'd like to welcome you to today's event, Contested Waters, Flashpoints for Conflict in Asia. This event has been a long time in the making, and we're delighted to have an esteemed panel of speakers to discuss these critical issues, including our report author, David Mickle. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce to you our latest addition to the USIP family, Tegan Blaine, who is our Senior Advisor on Environment and Conflict. Prior to joining USIP in 2020, she served as the Vice President on a climate change initiative at the National Geographic Society. She also led the climate change team at USAID's Bureau for Africa for over a decade, where she developed USAID's strategy and investment plan for its climate change work in Africa, and led a team that provided thought leadership and technical support to USAID's Africa mission. Tegan, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jumaina. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. I'd like to welcome everyone today to today's event, Contested Waters, Flashpoints for Conflict in Asia. As Jumaina said, my name is Tegan Blaine, and I recently joined the U.S. Institute of Peace as the Senior Advisor for Environment and Conflict. The United States Institute of Peace is a national, nonpartisan, independent institute founded by Congress and dedicated to the proposition that a world without violent conflict is possible, practical, and essential for US and global security. Today's event is part of a new effort within USIP to deepen our understanding of how environmental conflicts, especially conflicts over shared natural resources critical for food and water security, contribute to fragility. Although these conflicts have the potential to destabilize society, they may also provide an important entry point to promote dialogue and cooperation. USIP field operations have addressed conflicts over resources for years, including conflict over water. USIP is now consolidating learnings from its field experience and establishing a platform for research and increased engagement in environmental peace building. I'm greatly looking forward to today's event on water, including both a discussion around a paper written by David Mickle, as well as presentations from individuals from the field who are working directly on conflicts around water. As David writes in his introduction, by 2050, the combined effects of socioeconomic pressures and climate change could result in as many as 1.3 billion additional people facing too little water to meet their daily needs, with severe consequences for livelihoods and economic growth, not to mention water and food security. I look forward to engaging with all of you on a discussion about how we can address those conflicts peacefully and with a better outcome for all the people who depend on those resources. With that, I'd like to hand it back to Jumaina to introduce today's speakers.
Thank you. I just wanted to talk a little bit about USIP's work in Asia, which focuses on a broad spectrum of themes related to peace building. But our primary approach is to work with and support local partners to prevent, mitigate, and resolve conflict. To reduce future crises and the need for costly interventions, USIP also works with governments and civil societies to build their local capacity to manage conflict peacefully. We pursue our mission by linking research, policy, training, analysis, and direct action to support those who are working to build a more peaceful and inclusive world. To this end, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel of speakers who will share their perspectives on water conflict and diplomacy more broadly, as well as drill down and discuss specific country examples. David Mickle, the report author, is a senior researcher with the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. He previously served as a senior manager with the Stockholm International Water Institute. He has over 20 years of experience working with government, civil society, and the private sector to build cooperative solutions to policy challenges posed by global environmental change. I've also had the pleasure of working with David in a previous life, and so I'm delighted that he's able to share his insights with us today. Nangra Zakun from Burma, currently strategy with the Neon Foundation. She started her peace journey with Nien late in 2000 as a peace building trainer and facilitator. She's also served as the Secretary of Ethnic Nationality Mediators Fellowship, a network of ethnic mediators from a number of states in Burma, including Kachin, Kaya, Karen, Mon, and Chin states. Moreover, in partnership with the International Union for the Conservation of Nature and the Building River Dialogue and Governance organization, she's involved in creating dialogue spaces for the sustainability of river basins of the Irrawaddy and Salween rivers. Amit Ranjan is a research fellow at the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore. He is the author of 2 seminal works on South Asia. One is Contested Waters, India's Transboundary River Water Disputes in South Asia, and India-Bangladesh Border Disputes, History and Post-Colonial LBA Dynamics. He has also edited 3 books, Partition of India, Post-Colonial Legacies, India and South Asia, Challenges in Management, and Water Issues in Himalayan South Asia, Internal Challenges, Disputes, and Transboundary Tensions. His papers have been published in a number of well-respected journals, including Asian Survey, Asian Affairs, and Economic and Political Weekly. And last but not least, we have Abdul Ajaz, who is a doctoral candidate in the Department of Geography at Indiana University, Bloomington. His work focuses on the role of rivers in the making of modern Punjab. Over the last 10 years, he's written and published extensively on the Indus River Basin and its politics, as well as hydro-social relations and the Indus River. I am delighted that you'll all be able to hear their perspectives, and I will now turn it over to David, who will start us off by talking about the report that he has written for USIP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jemina and Tegan, and to USIP. I'd like to thank USIP both for this occasion today and for the opportunity to have produced the report on which this conference is taking off as a springboard. And I have prepared a short PowerPoint presentation to back up my remarks. So please bear with me for a moment while I start the PowerPoint, and please also allow me to thank all of you for joining us here today. So again, my name is David Mickel. I'm a senior researcher with the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute and the author of the paper on water conflict pathways and peace-building strategies on which we're going to discuss today. And let me just begin by highlighting the extent to which water is essential to modern society. I don't think that I need to persuade you that water is the key to managing so many aspects of modern societies and economies, from transportation and agriculture to energy and ecosystem services, also including sanitation, public health, and managing of weather extremes such as floods and droughts, and that these water uses are all interrelated and interconnected, that water can be used to grow food, but that food products can also be used as biosources for energy, or water can be used to generate hydropower, and that hydropower in turn can be used to pump water. So I don't think that I need to make the case to you that the stakes around water management are extremely high, and that these different uses are interrelated, and that priorities and choices have to be made about their use, since they are tied together at both the global level, but also the regional and the local levels as well. Right now, however, water resources are under significant stress. In this global map, you can see the number of months per year in which combined blue water withdrawals, that's surface water and groundwater resources, exceed the available water resources in that area for 5, 6, 10, 12 months a year. And around the world, some 3 billion people now are living in regions where water supplies do not meet the total demands for 4 months of the year, and 500 million people live in areas where total blue water, that's surface and groundwater demands, net demands, exceed available resources all year round. So water resources are under considerable stress today. And climate change is making these pressures worse. Calculations by the World Bank suggest that under a business as usual scenario, in which we don't take significant measures to mitigate the impact of climate change on water resources, that the stresses could reduce GDP by 2050 by 6% or more across much of Asia and much of Africa, and even in Southeast Asia, although the shading is somewhat difficult to see on this slide, the dramatic economic impacts could cut GDP in Southeast Asia by 1 to 2%. So the stakes are high, the pressures are great on water resources, not only in Asia, but around the world. This has led a number of observers, policymakers, policy analysts, practitioners, and pundits to question the impacts on peace and stability that competition over water resources might generate. And the United Nations defines water security as the capacity of a population to safeguard sustainable access to adequate quantities of acceptable quality of water for sustaining human well-being, socioeconomic development, for ensuring protection against waterborne pollution and water-related diseases, and also for preserving ecosystems in a climate of peace and stability. And water conflict can arise around any one of the elements of this water security equation, whether it be adequate quantities or adequate quality of resources, whether it be water's use for socioeconomic development, or whether it be questions about maintaining peace and stability. A number of studies that have tackled this question have looked specifically at the impacts of climate change on water resources availability, asking how shifts in precipitation patterns or in weather extremes or in the geographical or temporal distribution of water resources might generate tensions or contribute to conflict risks. But I would argue that we need to take a broader view of water conflict potential and the different causal pathways, indirect, mediated by a number of factors that could lead from water-related resources management to potential conflicts. And so I've developed in the PeaceWorks report a number of pathways, or a typology of pathways that could link water resources to potential conflicts. And they do include environmental pressures on shared water supplies that might arise from climate change. And the Sahel is an example of that, where a drought and diminished rainfall in the late 20th century shifted the range and the growing conditions for crops and grasses, and leading semi-nomadic herders who were seeking pasture for their livestock to graze on the lands of farmers, generating tensions between those farmer and herder populations, and periodically escalating into violence. But there are a number of other pathways as well, including water disasters and governing responses to floods and droughts, and whether those responses are perceived to be adequate and equitable by the affected populations. Water is a tool or a target of wars. We've seen in the case of Syria and Iraq, where forces on all sides, governmental and ISIS and anti-government forces, have targeted water infrastructure and water supplies as a means of controlling territory or populations. And then again, there are potential disputes over water services provision, as the so-called water wars in Bolivia of the late 20th century demonstrated, when the city of Cochabamba privatized, auctioned off its water services, and populations in that city, fearing that their traditional rights to water sources would be infringed, that they would lose traditional access to their water supplies, demonstrated, and a state of siege was declared in that city before public order was ultimately restored, and the water services were again taken over by the public authorities. And then again, in cases that we will see today in Asia, the cases of the Indus, for example, and cases in Myanmar, a couple of other pathways that we should note are those of the construction or operation of infrastructure on shared waterways. To benefit from water resources, populations need to construct water storage facilities, irrigation schemes, other means of managing those water resources. And when those infrastructure schemes are operated to the potential detriment, or where the perceived operation of those infrastructures may affect other populations that depend on those water resources, conflicts can arise arise over the management and use of those infrastructure services. Finally, two other pathways to highlight are the possibilities that the groups in society that control access to water resources, whether it's because they control the land surrounding the water supplies, or whether it's because they control decision making about managing or utilizing those water supplies, may expropriate or dispossess populations, communities from those water supplies, leading those populations to contest the way those sources are managed, contest the way that they have been excluded from those resources. So the takeaway here that I particularly want to highlight is that although environmental pressures such as climate change are changing the dynamics of water management through increased variability in precipitation patterns, and increased volatility in water supplies, in shifting the distribution of water supplies, it's important to note that a number of mediating factors intervene and prevent there being a direct deterministic cause and effect relationship in between environmental pressures and potential conflict risks. That factors such as when and where the water stresses occur relative to demand, or how important water supplies are to different sectors of the economy or to different populations, and mostly the existence and the efficacy of coping capacities, including technical infrastructure, management mechanisms, financial and material resources. All of these influence the nature and extent of impacts on societies, and therefore the extent to which these pressures might give rise to political contestation or grievances, making management structures, making governance one of the key intervening factors and one of the key variables in looking at the development of conflict risks. And so it's fair to say and important to say that although insecurity and conflict risks may be influenced by changes in the physical availability and access to the water resource. A very important ingredient in conflict, and I would argue a more important ingredient in potential conflict, is the unequal or allocation or the inadequate access to decision-making and management and governance decisions around the resources, more important than inequity or unavailability of the physical supply. In the cases that we're going to look at today and discuss more at length with the other panelists, manifest these different causal pathways. So the Indus, for example, is an example of a conflict type around construction or operation of infrastructure on a shared waterway. The Indus Basin, the light green area, which I hope you can see highlighted by the cursor on this map. This is the Indus Basin, but the international borders cut right through the basin, and most importantly, cut through the 6 main branches of the Indus, flowing from India into Pakistan, such that downstream Pakistan fears that the operation, construction, management of infrastructure by India on the upper stretches of the basin might interfere with or disrupt its water supplies in its portion of the basin, and that this is a significant question for water availability and for water resources management. That already we can see that the long-term available supplies in the basin are increasingly outpaced by long-term available demand. And that this places increasing water pressure on managers to make choices and prioritize decisions. And one of the resources which many riparians in the basin wish to develop is hydropower capacity in a region where hundreds of millions of people lack access to electricity. But the operation of that infrastructure would potentially affect downstream flows in the basin, potentially disrupting or being perceived to disrupt availability for the lower riparian, in this case, Pakistan. And so this is the main dynamic of a water conflict or potential water conflict in the Indus Basin. Likewise, in Myanmar, Myanmar is a country that has ample, abundant water resources. In contrast to the Indus Basin, where we saw the rising demands increasingly outpacing the available supply, in Myanmar, all of Myanmar's water demands are met by less than 3% of its available water supplies. But in Myanmar, the government wishes to develop hydropower as a source of energy to electrify the population and to extend the electrical grid to all consumers across the country, and also as a source of revenue from trading hydropower generation with the surrounding countries. They're also seeing their electricity demand rise. So already in Myanmar today, almost 60%, more than half of the power generation in Myanmar comes from 29 hydropower plants, and the government plans to further expand this resource and has almost 50 MOUs or agreements with other countries, foreign corporations, to develop those resources. But in Myanmar, the lion's share of hydropower, the viable hydropower capacity, is located in border states within the Union of Myanmar. The Shan, the Karen, the Kachin, those three states alone hold two-thirds of the available hydropower capacity. And in order to develop this capacity, the central government of Myanmar has resorted to a militarization of the zones where hydropower is available, to forced displacement of populations, to seizures of territory, which is feeding into long-standing regional ethnic-based insurgencies that originated in the formation of the Union of Myanmar more than half a century ago. So here we can see the correlation, the co-location of hydropower development, the green, the red triangles that you see on this map of Burma, and conflict incidents. All of the orange and yellow spots, circles, correspond to a certain number of conflict incidents, many of them violent, many of them fatal. And so you can see the correlation here between areas of hydropower development and militarized conflict, as the state of Myanmar employs the military to seize the land or to take over the land needed to build hydropower facilities, to build reservoirs that will enable the operation of hydropower facilities. So these two examples highlight the nature of water conflict possibilities being mediated by management structures, management decisions, and governance structures. And we'll delve into these cases, I think, more in detail with the panelists. But I think we can springboard from this brief introduction to ask, what does this suggest about the future of water as a potential conflict flashpoint in Asia? And the pressures on the water resources are going to continue to grow, even under these three scenarios that were developed by IASA, the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis in Austria. Even under a sustainability scenario that you see in the upper left here, one of the more favorable management scenarios, water demand is going to rise by 20 to 30% by mid-century in these different scenarios. So there'll be pressure from growing populations, growing economies to meet those demands through the shared water resources. Climate change is also going to continue straining water supplies around the world. In these global graphics, you see increase in water stress by the end of the 21st century, indicated by the red areas that show the rising demands compared to available supplies in many basins around the world due to the pressures of climate change. And governance structures are in many cases inadequate to meeting these pressures. In looking only at international basins and those river basins where treaties are in place to govern or manage or to make choices about shared water resources. Around the world, many basins are not covered by international agreements. Where those international agreements exist, they may not have mechanisms to allocate shared water resources between the parties. They may not have mechanisms to address variability in available water resources. They may not have conflict resolution mechanisms, or they may not cover all of the riparians, as is the case in the Indus Basin, where the Indus Waters Treaty between India and Pakistan doesn't include Afghanistan and China, the other two riparians in the basin. So pressures, demands on water resources are growing, climate change strains on water resources are growing, and governance structures to address those challenges are in many cases inadequate. And this inadequacy of institutions at the international level is replicated in many cases at the national level as well. So in an estimation by UNEP, looking again at transboundary river basins, a number of rivers across Asia, as well as elsewhere in the world, are foreseen to be particular hotspots for potential stresses, strains, conflicts, due not only to the environmental demands, the environmental pressures, and socioeconomic demands from rising populations and growing economies, but also from the lack of adequate institutional mechanisms to tackle these challenges cooperatively. This is not to say that I would foresee overt violent conflict over water resources in Asia or elsewhere around the world, but I think that there are reasons to be concerned about the strains that rising demands and institutional inadequacies are placing on shared resources, and the possibilities that these problems could lead to frictions, tensions, grievances between parties at local, national, and regional levels. So just to conclude, I will note that there are many strategies, many approaches to help address these strains in Asia and elsewhere. And they include building, preparing appropriate infrastructure to manage water resources, the sharing of information and data about the strains on shared water resources in order to inform policy, but also particularly strengthening institutions and management systems to address possible tensions around shared water resources. And so in the spirit of the report and in the spirit of USIP's new program to address environmental conflict through peacebuilding measures, the report itself concludes by asking a number of questions that can help orient efforts by third parties, whether it be governments or whether it be CSOs or organizations like USIP, questions that can help third parties promote cooperative water diplomacy, promote cooperation between riparians, between water users dependent upon shared water resources. And so the takeaway that I would like to leave you with today is that water conflict pathways are exceedingly complex, that they arise not only, in fact, not mainly from environmental strains on water resources, but are mediated through societal and institutional factors, that governance is an extremely important key variable in addressing potential water conflict, and that governance is also the main area in which we should try and develop potential solutions or strategies for addressing water conflict, and that this is an important area for U.S. diplomacy, for organizations like USIP, in that governance questions are perhaps the hardest to address. Unlike other peacebuilding strategies for intervention in the midst of conflict, or of trying to send in mediators or diplomats, for example, when societies are on the cusp of conflict. Building institutions is a long-term process and needs to be worked at beforehand, before conflicts arise, is a better approach than to try and bolster participatory and inclusive management and governance systems once a conflict has begun. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions and conversation.
Thank you, David. And speaking of questions, you can ask your questions on the USIP website where you're viewing this event. So please, we've gotten a number of questions already. Please keep them coming. And with that, I will turn it over to Nangra. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you very much. Good evening, good morning. Thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss as a panelist here on this very great occasion of USIP, and to share my insights and my experience in a brief period. I really want to acknowledge the author of this report, bringing the lessons from 3 case studies and recommendations on the water governance and water diplomacy. And I think the water depending on where on the globe, some may face water scarcity and some may face with water related to the management, how the governance. And so as I look at the report, and before I talk about the case study of Myanmar, and I look at the water governance, and there's a set of questions, how to get involved, how to formulate the third-party water diplomacy engagement. And when I look through the questions, some of the questions are very much relevant to the Nisong Dam in this case. Of course, there are many problematic dams, but in this case, it's Nisong Dam. And I think many of the points that have to consider in the assessment are directly related to the Nisong Dam. Having said that, when I look at the study, there are some points missing. Although the recommendation of the question guide mentioned, but in the case study of Myanmar, Nisong Dam case, I think there are at least like 4 perspectives which is missing. It is number 1 is the cultural social perspective. Actually, in the case study, it mentioned about Myanmar's cultural heritage, but actually, it is about the ethnic people in that area, the Jingpo, the Kachins. So it's just the place, Miso, the confluence is the ancestral domain of the Kachin people. Whenever they talk about where they coming from, and where they are now, they usually talk about that place. We cannot omit that Miso area, the triangle area of this Mali and Maika. So, and also this becomes the heartland of Kachins. No, now Kachin are not moving around much. Kachin state is there, but it's still, again, this is the landmark of Kachin state. The confluence itself is the landmark of Kachin state. Every people in Myanmar, maybe they might not have been to Kachin state, but they know the confluence. And then it is Kachin state. So because of this cultural social perspective is not just in this paper, it's also in the process of this construction or then MOU process. This was totally neglected. And because of this reason, there have been many, the villagers themselves and other Kachin leaders in other townships also opposed before the MOU was signing. So that has been one point. And another is the political perspective, which is related with the armed struggle, the armed conflict in Kachin state. If we look at the timeline of those that decade. It is it is happening during the ceasefire period. So KIO, the ethnic armed organization, have a ceasefire agreement in 1994, and then there was like when the dam construction was started, and all the people know, and of course the KIO also knew about it, but nobody has a complete information. So like there were certain letters sent to the senior General Tan Shui, that then was the top leader of the army, and also written to Chinese authority. And so it's like after 2 times of writing, trying to stop the dam, there was no discussion. So there have been no discussion on this. On top of that, there was the state army offered the KIO, the armed organization, ethnic armed organization, this border guard force agenda. If we look at the before that, in 2018, there was a constitution. No, there was a constitution. 2008 constitution was to endorse, and KIO was with the endorse it with the hope of to get involved in the political party, to take part in the 2010 election. But what they gained was that to change them into the border guard force. That was in 2009. So these are some of the consequences, or some of the reasons that this political perspective cannot be neglected. And another point is historical perspective. People in the ethnic region are very much afraid of dams. So there was a first large dam, the Modia Dam in Kaya and Shan border, that caused over 10,000 people displaced, Kaya Karenni people displaced. So, and they have never got this electricity. Those electricity just distribute to the central part of the country and the major cities. So these are, and so that is also historical history of the dam construction. There's no trust because of lack of transparency, where this benefit will know economic perspective that is related with the agriculture. Many of the agriculture lands are totally depending, I mean, from the central part of the country, where it's a dry region, they have to totally depending on the Irrawaddy for their crops. So that's why what I'm trying to say is the Miso Dam is not just because of not just need to deal with the people there, not just because of KIO started fighting. It is kind of, there's a much complexity that has to be stopped. So from the economy status or economic perspective, there were some, the people in the dry zone also very concerned that they might not have enough water if there is a dam when they need the water. So, and also, you know, there are other points that people becoming more concern about the negative impact of the Miso Dam. And yes, of course, at that point of time, I think I have to add fifth perspective, which was not also put here, is the legal framework of Myanmar. In that period, there have been no water policy. National water policy was approved in 2014, and the water framework directives just approved in 2015. So, and water law was in 2017. Although these laws and policies are not really reflecting the situation, but now there is. there are policies that we can start working on it. At that time, in 2006, 8, or 11, when the Thamara Teng Singh stopped the dam, there have been no legal framework, reliable legal framework at all. So these are the things, and I'm very much would like to discuss also for the water policy engagement as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nangara. Amit, over to you, please.
Thanks, Joanna, and thanks, David, for such a wonderful report you have prepared. Besides climate change, I just want to add one more thing, that is increasing population, especially in my area, that is South Asia. That is making lots of burden on the existing water supply. So even if you have water and the population is more than, that is creating a burden on the existing thing. Then if you look by the country wise, the demand of water is likely to be 2 times more than the supply in India by 2021. Pakistan is already under, part of Pakistan is under high water stress, while other parts are also facing the stress. Then the case is different in case of Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan. While Bangladesh has enough water, but the problem is that the most of the water is fresh water it has is contained with arsenic, that is causing lots of pollution and health concerns also. Then Nepal has water, but it has a issue of management, how it managing. Bhutan, one of the richest in terms of per capita amount of water, but the problem is that as the people are located in a different part of Bhutan, so they are not getting access to much water, whatever they need for even for domestic purposes. Although Bhutan is not a great industrial or agriculture country, but people are not getting. And if you look at all such issues and then look into the problems they are facing, that is somewhere leading to competition between the transboundary, leading to competition to get more and more water from the transboundary regions. Especially if you look at the case of India and Bangladesh, if you look at the China and India, although China, I don't consider China to be a part of South Asia, political South Asia, but it is a part of hydrological South Asia, because most of the water, river water, they have their origin in Tibet Plateau. And they depend, almost all South Asian countries, Himalayan South Asian countries depend a lot on China for water. So they are creating lots of tensions also. Then in terms of water infrastructure you talked about, that's perfect, but many of the countries in South Asia, especially the case of Pakistan, take case of Nepal, take case of Bhutan, they do not have enough resources or technologies to build effective water management infrastructure. So what they are doing, they are calling up the countries from outside, outside countries, or taking help of multilateral or international institutions. So if you look at the case of Pakistan, many of the dams like Indus Cascade under CPEC, they are being built by China. In Nepal, India and China are contesting, competing with each other to get this hydrostructure project. Then in Bhutan, it's India. In Bangladesh, there are few projects which are being taken up by China, and there are some other projects which has been taken up by India. So it's all such competition and the political tensions are creating much more, making the water issue much more complicated. And it's not water per se, it's a political equation also. If you look at the India-Pakistan Indus Water Treaty or Indus River System, it's more than political than something we have to deal with hydrological. Since 1960, Indus Water Treaty has been criticized in both in India and Pakistan by a large number of people. Still, it is existing. In 1999, first time after Kargil War, there was a huge demand from Indian civil society. Why not we establish the IWT Then in 2008, after Mumbai attack, there was again the demand. Then for the first time in 2016, the Indian Prime Minister said that terrorism and water cannot flow together. So that was one of the major event, because earlier whatever happened, political leadership of India, at least they never said that we are not going to do it, because in 2008, despite lots of noises about Indus water capping, Manmohan Singh, when he was Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister of India, he said no, we are not going to touch this IWT. So in 2019, once again, India said that we are going to stop the flow of eastern flowing rivers, that is 3 rivers which flow in part of Pakistan after crossing into India. So such a complicated issues, and most of the hydrological projects, if you look at the hydrological projects in Kashmir, you find that if means I was just I just finished a paper for India Review, which is going to be published maybe by 2021 January issue. If you look at the hydroelectricity potential of the region, it's means we can, if we cooperate, India and Pakistan cooperate, we can become a export hub of hydroelectricity. But you know what happens, that you go, there is a permanent Indus Water Commission. They used to meet annually, but the problem happens that sometimes India raises questions, sometimes Pakistan raises questions. So almost all hydrological projects, it takes more than years to get clear and then come into effect. With China as a factor, with China as an upper riparian, the problem has become much more dangerous because of growing India-China tensions, also engagement of China in Pakistan also. So all such things have complicated more and more water, means it's not water. For example, I just give you one more example on this, that the Teesta water that India and Bangladesh interim agreement signed and agreed in 2011. The problem is what when they signed this agreement, and then when they wanted to implement, the Union Government of India, they said that we are ready to implement, but the state government says no, we don't have water. We don't have water to supply to Bangladesh. So from where I'm going to get such things. And then Teesta is considered to be one of the highly burdened river in that region. So this is going to be a problem also. And then in 2026, India and Bangladesh, which signed Ganga Water Treaty in 1996, that will complete 30 years. And that was signed only for 30 years. So in 2026, we have to look at in such situation whether India and Bangladesh agree again to go with that treaty, or sign a new treaty, or make some amendments in that treaty. And given the political relation between India and Bangladesh, although it looks very good, but the political issues between India and Bangladesh, which has popped up in from 2016 with this NRC and CA, means it looks very deep. There's a very deep situation that they are going to agree on the same treaty. So there may be some changes in format and issues. Who is going to make compromise? Whether India is going to make compromise, or whether Bangladesh is going to make compromise. That we have to look at. Thanks.
Thank you, Amit. Over to you, Ijaz.
Thank you, Jemina, and thank you, USIP, for giving me this wonderful opportunity to read this amazing report and take extensive notes as I write my dissertation. So it was a great read, actually. Thank you, David, for putting together this timely and wonderful report. Most of what I wanted to say has been already said. I think Nangra and Amit did an amazing job of pointing to some of the most significant aspects that the report itself highlights, but also, you know, the discussion adds to that. I just wanted to quickly talk about three points that I think I found that the report flags, but does not have time to kind of build on. And I find them important as a human cultural geographer. I work with, like, at the smaller scales at the village level. And I think that the smaller conflicts also kind of add up to these larger conflicts. And it's important to kind of think about the question of scale and the conflict, for example, within Pakistan and within provinces that lead up to a larger configuration, a larger political configuration that sets up a scenario in which conflict seems a possibility, especially in the wake of climate change and other pressures on the water sharing arrangements that India and Pakistan already have. So the 3 points that I want to highlight are the question of class. Number one, the question of exclusion, and particularly along gender lines. And the third is the question of knowledge. What kind of knowledge governs the management of water in different parts of the world. I think the report does a wonderful, taking a one-size-fits-all solution or methodology. I really appreciated the comparative methodology of the report, and its iterative and participatory and scientific recommendations at the end. However, I think that there's an important question of class that requires us to think about the simultaneity of water surplus and water scarcity at different scales. As in between India and Pakistan, conflict and cooperation exist simultaneously. Similarly, I think in various parts of the world, various parts of the Indus Basin itself, surplus and scarcity exist simultaneously. So before the start of the pandemic, I was doing my ethnographic field work in a canal colony village in Punjab. And in that village, while there was ample water available to irrigate rich people's sugarcane fields, there was no water for poor peasants' subsistence farming. So there's, and many people like Danish Mustafa and Majid Akhtar and others have pointed out, repeatedly pointed out, that Pakistan might not be entirely water scarce in general, but scarcity is produced through distribution. There is ample water for rich people's lawns and gardens and golf courses, but not enough water for the everyday household needs for the poor. So how to think about those smaller conflicts is the question that I want us to kind of keep in mind. The second and related challenge is the challenge of the question of exclusion, and especially along gender lines. In my fieldwork, again, girls often as young as 5 or 6 would make multiple trips on foot or donkey carts to access the 2 water pumps located almost 2 miles outside of the village. So it was their daily routine. Water scarcity, I think, impacts women and girls disproportionately, and in ways which are not considered high politics, and not addressed with the same urgency as some other water-related questions. So I guess while we think about the question of crisis and conflict, how to think about these differential impacts along gender lines or class lines. And the third point that I just wanted to make was the question of knowledge. In the wake of climate change and the consequent water scarcity, the idea of scientific management of water has gained so much support and credibility that it is treated as the ultimate truth. So scholars of critical hydropolitics have already pointed out that how scientific techniques and concepts like integrated river basin management result in the exclusion of indigenous peoples and erasure of cultural understanding of water, as Nangra was pointing earlier, and the hegemony of scientific ideas of water results in an attitude of what scholar Grim Vine has called disresponsibilization, where people tend to leave water control and management in the hands of experts and engineers. This results in a disconnect between the people and the policy. In the places like Pakistan, where the politics of knowledge also maps onto the politics of language, it becomes difficult for the managers and peasants to communicate in the same idiom even. So I guess the larger point that I want to make here is first to question the hegemony of scientific discourse, and second, to emphasize the importance of finding out ways to value and incorporate indigenous knowledges, especially the cultural, spiritual, or religious uses of water and water bodies. I think doing so is critical if we want to build a more inclusive water management, as the report suggests, and avoid conflict in the longer run. So addressing this smaller conflict, I think, might have a cumulative effect on how to manage or address the larger conflict. And that's my take on it. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, all of you, for your wonderful insights. We appreciate also the questions that are coming in through the website, but I will take the moderator's prerogative to ask a few questions of the panel, given that based on the report and their comments. So first, to David, to you, the report discusses public awareness as a peace-building strategy for water resources conflict. Could you elaborate on that? I ask this because public awareness campaigns have been done on the national level. They're being done on the global level, as we see with COVID, but we're still seeing spikes in COVID. So how do you envision these public awareness campaigns in the various countries that you're looking at to be effective? Because citizens don't have, especially when they don't have confidence in their governments, to provide accurate information about any number of issues, including water. So if you could elaborate a little bit on that, I would appreciate that.
Thanks, Jemima. I think two aspects of potential public awareness building efforts, and Nangra and Abdulaziz have actually hit upon elements of these. One is the question of audience and reaching audiences at the local level or the regional, the national level, at the appropriate level for the scale of the problem that is being addressed. And as we've noted, those scales are complex and overlapping, and they are politically determined. In highlighting the importance of governance and management in my remarks, I could have also been using the word politics. It is a political decision of how to frame the problem, of how to determine who the stakeholders and the actors are. And one of the critical issues in building public awareness is identifying and reaching the public. So language is an issue, not only technical language or scientific language, but literal language, whether it be Hindi or Maharashtra or Urdu in the case of the Indus, or other languages, that often the knowledge that is being built or acquired or sought in some communities, particularly the scientific technical community, is not made available to other stakeholder communities or user communities. So that's one aspect of building public awareness, is targeting, identifying, reaching the public. But then that arrow also goes in the other direction, to your question, particularly about building trust. And that is that the stakeholders, water users, consumers, again, at whatever level that be, the highly localized or the larger community and regional levels, are also participants in building up the knowledge base, in building up the awareness of the issues as they are framed, so that local users can be critical sources of demand patterns, for example, their needs, including not only their physical needs or economic needs, but as Nangrab had pointed out, the cultural meanings of the resources and the access to the resources and decisions about the resources. Those stakeholders, those actors are well positioned to know what their needs are, what their claims are, who else, with what other stakeholders they are interacting, but also to supply environmental information, for example. That it's a fact that in many water basins around the world, we lack local level observations because the areas are remote, because water gauges were not in place or are non-functioning, just to take that one example. So that local level observations and what is now in certain schools of thought being called participatory research can be a counterpart to participatory decision making, and calling upon local actors and stakeholders to not only take part in the management decisions through participatory processes, but to take part in building the knowledge base and building the political awareness of the issues by being given the tools to monitor meteorological variables, for example, or hydrological variables that technologies like, for example, the mobile phone make increasingly possible. So in those public awareness campaigns, I think it's important that we incorporate both of those elements, the aspect to which we need to reach the right publics, but also the aspect in which publics are part of building the knowledge and awareness that then can be deployed to address the challenges.
Thank you, David. Nangra, for you, because continuing on the conversation about the report itself, one of the recommendations that David mentions is third-party diplomacy as a way to mitigate conflict on water resources. However, I think globally we're seeing the reduction of the confidence of third-party diplomacy, or even the willingness to for third parties to get involved in internal state matters more broadly. Given the increase of foreign investment and infrastructure in your country, is there a role for third-party diplomacy to mitigate and resolve conflict over water resources?
Until now, it's a contested area for Myanmar. If you even look at the peace process, the current peace process, the government doesn't want any intermediary, the official intermediary role. Although the government meaning the former government, the U Thein Sein government and the current government, NLD government also doesn't. It doesn't seem that they would welcome the international intermediary role, the third party role in the peace process. Even in the peace process, although they welcome the consultants to process to advise, to get advice on the process. So given that situation, understanding that situation, it is quite a challenging, but who knows, everything can change. If the third party diplomacy effort, without a third party diplomacy effort, now the case we are talking about, the Misong Dam, it will go anywhere. It won't go anywhere. So how can we stop, or how can we continue? There's something that we never used to do has to happen in this case. So that's why it could be a try. There should be a try on that. And as I study the report of David, and I'm very much looking forward that if the try is timely and very kind of sensitively packed. The package should be sensitive, and then there will be what you call possibility. Because I'm saying this because there have been several ideas already floating how to continue or how to stop. There are some ideas how to stop. Something like, there is when we talk about Miso, there is another small dam which name never mentioned, but it is already part of this deal. So that could be the Chipuinge Dam, which is already running. Could be one alternative that we can start negotiating or start working on it. And there have been some idea start giving that to change that confluence around that confluence area. Now it's there have been some, the places already done some what do you call this? They have, let me say, destroyed some of the nature. So whether we can change it into a peace park for ecotourism or something like that. So there have been some, that is to stop the dam. And some says that, okay, what about renegotiating because it started at a 7 cascaded dam. What about building 2 dams upstream which are less social, economic and environmental impact, which is less impact on those area and with high efficiency. So these ideas are already floated. The thing is if the third party diplomacy initiated the transparency of the MOU is very important. So until now, we're talking about Misong Dam and nobody have seen the MOU and we don't know what is the deal inside. So, and there was a commission working on it and there is no public report until now. So it's kind of a mysterious process, mysterious things happening. So if the third party diplomacy can start working on it, so that is something that we are hopeful. We cannot just go on like this because we know that there is a Belt and Road Initiative, and under this area is really fenced until now. Although the construction is stopped, it is fenced, and some things are going on inside, nobody knows. So because of that, we don't want to continue like this. I mean, we want to do something, but as you know that the internal, the people, the groups inside is almost impossible to work on it. So this is something that international community should try. Yeah, thank you very much.
No, thank you. And lastly to Amit and Ijaz. I feel kind of silly asking this question because given the politics between both India and Pakistan, but with their Indus Water Treaty, is there any hope for broader cooperation around these critical environmental and climate issues between the two countries? Or, I'm an optimist, so I'm thinking, despite how much vitriol there is between the politics between the two countries, there are critical issues that are facing both countries. For example, the smog in both the Punjabs. This is something that they could easily work on together. Is there hope? Even if there isn't right now, what do you think could be the way forward, in a year or two down the road, even though a year or two down the road might be too late, given the drastic climate changes and shifts we're seeing already in the weather patterns, in the smog, and the pollution? I'd love to get both of your insights on what could be the way forward.
Yeah,
Amit, please go ahead.
Yeah. If you look at the Indus Water Treaty, there's an Article 7 under which talks about the cooperation and how to increase the friendship between the two countries over the Indus River system. Then there is the Article 12.4, which says, and 12.3, which categorically mention that no country can unilaterally scrap the treaty. For that also you have to have a treaty to scrap it. So it means, but they can make amendments. But given the situation, if you look at the relation between the two countries, especially after 2014, with the rise of water nationalism in India, growing anti-Pakistan sentiment in India, the majoritarianism increase. Means I am not as optimistic as you are, at least for now. So maybe by after 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, there may be some, I may become optimistic if the situation improves. But if you look at the present situation, they are not in talking terms. Although the Indus Water Commissioner meeting, which was suspended in 2016 by India, then in 2017 March, India agreed that, okay, so we will go and participate in at Islamabad. Then there was inspection has to be carried out in Indian side of Indus River system area of the projects, but that didn't happen because of at UN the two foreign minister from two countries, India and Pakistan, were supposed to meet, but they didn't, and that affected the. So politics has affected so much into Indus Water Treaty and Indus River system that it becomes. I don't have much optimism. I'm not very much optimistic about it. Otherwise, means my suggestion is that if we have to have some cooperation, then we have to just you know, remove political aspect from the water aspect and let people to people dialogue and let the people from catchment areas, because sometimes what happens that people from Chennai who do not have anything to do with Indus Water Treaty, and then they also come out and say that no, we have to scrap Indus Water Treaty, or we have to stop water to Pakistan. And so they do not have to do anything with any industrial system. So that has to, you just have to you divide between what is the political angle and what is the water. So you have to look into entire Indus River system as a water, and then you have to make policies, engage people, engage the stakeholders, engage the environment, people who are working on environment, people, the locals, people who are affected due to drought and floods. So unless you do, and if you leave everything on political leadership of the two countries, I do not think they are going to make any amendments in this situation.
Thank you. Ajaz?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I want to locate my kind of theoretical position in between Jumaina's idealism and Amit's kind of more practical realism. I think when it comes to Indus Basin Water Treaty, I totally agree with Amit. There does not seem to be any hope, at least in the near future. But on the other hand, Indus Basin Treaty is the only institution where India and Pakistan have long cooperated with each other. So it's kind of an interesting institution, and there is a need to build on that. And I think, I mean, you know, between India and Pakistan, anything can happen at any moment. So who knows, like, you know, tomorrow things get better and they can start working on that. I think the better approach would be to like start with smaller steps. And as you mentioned, this idea of smog, which is kind of really, really bad in Lahore and Delhi, and it's like really impacting Punjab on both sides of the border. So in a way, I think the ideal solution would be to build a kind of a practical working group between, you know, people, a practical working group on both sides of the border that kind of interacts, those two groups interact with each other occasionally, and they are comprised of both like the technical people and also like the people who are actually impacted by it and the peasant who are supposed to be the cause of it. So if they kind of manage to hammer out a solution there, and they can take lessons from there to kind of expand their cooperation. So we need to, I think, find out like the areas of cooperations where which have a shorter or no history of conflict. That would be the right way to go. But I'm of course not entirely you know, hopeless as nothing's going to happen. Definitely, something good will come out of it.
Amit, you I think unmuted, might have something to say. I was going to say, maybe, is this a role for third-party diplomacy? Is this something that, someone, from another country can, not sure if the UN is the right organization or not. There's been some questions about the role of the UN. But again, between India and Pakistan, the UN has not had too much success in other
Right.
areas. So, but yeah, Amit, please, and if you
No,
want to
World Bank,
third-party diplomacy.
World Bank, yeah, sorry. World Bank is always already there. It has mediated the Indus Water Treaty, and on behalf of World Bank, its vice president signed on a few annexures and few provisions. If you look at this Kishan Ganga project, over which India and Pakistan, they went for to the court of tribunal, and then order came up. Then again, India started building its own side of KHEP. Pakistan have their own argument over the Kishan Ganga hydroelectricity project. There were also reports in Indian media that during this building of the KHEP, Pakistani army fired some shells near the project site. Although it didn't affected the people who were working there and the project itself, but still they feel that it was an attack on Indian projects by the Pakistan. So, and afterwards, Pakistan went to World Bank, knocked the door. Then after 2 meetings or 3 meetings, the World Bank also released the press statements. But it has not effectively done anything to, just make India and Pakistan sit together and say that this is the Indus Water Treaty mediated by this thing, and you have to cooperate. And the cooperation part entirely depends on India and Pakistan. China or any other country, China means more than any other country, China has its stake because it's upper riparian to most of the IRS system. So even with India, it doesn't share at present a good relationship. We have tensions over the border. So, and China has its own water concerns. So it's very difficult for anyone to get into India, Pakistan over this IRS system. And looking at this present situation in India and Pakistan, I am Abdul has correctly said, but I am in fact a few years back I had some hope that at the end of the day, India and Pakistan people sit together, find some cooperative way to cooperate over this Indus Water Treaty and the sharing and doing working on similar projects, hydroelectricity projects. But after a few years, means after 3 or 4 years, and the way the politics has affected this entire water discourse in India and Pakistan, and the nature of Indian society, which has changed after 2014. So because if you go for cooperation, you need 2 things: you have to make compromise and you have to make adjustment. And we can means India can make adjustment with Bangladesh, India can make adjustment on compromise with Nepal, but in case of Pakistan, it's entirely difficult. Even the political leadership knows this thing, that the moment they are going to make some adjustment or compromise, they talk about it, it is going to backfire. So it's very difficult for them to make anything. And the growing water nationalism, if you look at the Indian media after 2016 militant attack in Kashmir, or in 2019 militant attack, means the Indian media, which is very, especially the regional media, that is Hindi media, they went berserk and they say, no, we have to scrap Indus Water Treaty. And the experts means, who have never written anything on Indus Water Treaty, or I don't know whether they have seen Indus River system itself, they came over to the media and they keep on saying that, okay, so we have to do the same situation. Means if you look at the Pakistani side also, so there may be there are scholars who work on this Indus River system. They also feel that, okay, no, it's our own water. For cooperative attitude, you have to accept that this is not a sovereign property. Water is not a transboundary river waters are not a sovereign property of any country, and you have to cooperate between the two countries or with other transboundary or other transboundary countries to make more and more effective use of the available water resources, to give more and more water to people who need them for domestic consumption, for industrial purposes, and for agriculture activity. So this is a situation. I don't have more to say.
Thank you. Abdul, Jazzy, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, quickly. Yeah, I think there is definitely a need of third party here, because if you look at the history of diplomacy between India and Pakistan, the agreement which were mediated by a third party, be it the partition of the subcontinent to the Indus Water Treaty to Tashkent Declaration. These are the treaties which are upheld by the states on both sides. But then think about Lahore Declaration, or similar examples where the two states kind of they decided to resolve the issue between themselves. It didn't really kind of pan out the way they wanted. So I think there is. And especially, I think, again, the starting with the smaller, where the stakes are less, like, for example, with the fog issue, a smog issue, it's much easier to kind of build a platform where both countries can build cooperation, and building on that, they can, kind of cooperate in other areas as well.
Thank you. Shifting gears, we have a interesting question that's come through from our audience. Ijaz, this is sparked by your comment about how women and girls are disproportionately affected by water stresses or surplus. They're asking more about the formal decision making. I'd like to add on to that and ask our country experts to talk about how this is happening. I think we know from media reports how women and girls are disproportionately affected by these water stresses or surpluses. Not just, but if you can comment, anyone can jump in on not just the impact on women and girls, but also what local governments or governments can do to protect women and girls, because there have been some horrible stories about women and girls being attacked on the way to get water. I think at least I know in South Asia, but I'd love to hear from Nengra as well if this is an issue that she's seeing in her country as well, and if there have been steps either on the local level or the national level to help protect women and girls when they're trying to access resources.
Sorry, allow for a minute. Sorry.
So you can start with, yeah.
You can.
Please, Nengra, go ahead.
Okay. I don't want to talk about the in general. So particularly with this kind of constructing dams, especially with this Missile Dam, even though it is just the beginning, there have been, because of there have been some exploratory period for like three years of period, and we already have the community, the local people, especially women and girls, already have experiences like sexual abuse already started, even though this it is only in the survey period, 2-3 years period. So when we look at it, actually the government, at the end of the day, we don't have national policy which really protects the women and girls. Not just not specifically on this foreign direct investment, and also in the normal situation in the country. So our women, let me say, the violence against women law, we call it POVAO law, the Prevention of Violence Against Women. This is still not yet enacted. still in the discussion. So, and in the foreign direct investments, there has been so no special clauses to protect the women and girls. So, given that circumstances, for many rights defenders also have a very concern from other experiences, like the dam construction will be like 15 years. And we don't have a proper law which will protect our women and girls in those areas. And many of them are voiceless, let me say. So in this kind of situation, these are, it's affect whatever development projects, mega projects, name it related to water or whatever, then this is a big issue to be considered to go forward with this foreign direct investment.
Oh, Jaz, Amit, David, anyone else would like to chime in on this?
Yeah, quickly, I just wanted to, David, sorry if you wanted to go, it's all right. Yeah, I want to say, apart from violence against women, I think the very labor of fetching water, it's like very disproportionately distributed, and using water in the household. And that kind of, when seen against women's participation in decision making on distribution and management of water, that portrays a very sorry scene, especially I think in Pakistan, where and the village that I'm talking about, that I'm doing my field work in, the women are not part of any decision making, even at the level of household. Like they are made to kind of go and get water, and agricultural water is much bigger priority than household water, and that's why because that's where men mostly confront the state. And when it comes to the scale of the state or national scale, this question, as Amit was talking about water nationalism, it has been so masculinized, especially after building its connection with the question of Kashmir. So it's like so militarized and masculinized question, and women are not part of any decision making at any scale, and that is something that I think is a very serious concern, and that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. David, Amit, did you have anything else to add?
Well, I would wish to defer to their country experts.
Yeah, even in drought-affected areas, if in almost all South Asian.
Amit, then we'll go back to David for the last word.
Yeah, even in drought-affected areas in India and almost in all South Asia, we have seen the first one to drop out from the school is girl child, because they have to do all household chores, and then they have to go travel maybe 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer, or more than that to give water. Violence, there has been some cases where violence happened, but it's not a very documented sort of thing. But still, there are cases which has been reported in media houses that while going to fetch water from the river or near sources of water, there has been some violence, maybe in form of physical violence or molestations. But there has been no such documented things, I say, and it's applied to entire South Asia. It's not like only for India, because one reason we are more and more patriarchal society, more than any other region of the world, maybe Africa. I don't know.
Thank you, Amit. David?
I just wanted to briefly emphasize the point that, again, the gender issues, the exposure of women and children to the impacts of water stress, but also to potentially detrimental impacts of inapt decision making about water management, highlights the need to again explicitly address the political aspects of the governance and management issues, to be direct and explicit about inclusive decision making, about acknowledging who the stakeholders and the participants are, and to think in integrated fashion across all of these different scale and thematic issues that all of the panelists had raised, the not only temporal and geographical scale down to the household level, but also across sectors and issues, from the cultural meaning of water to the economic meaning of water, the livelihoods that it supports. And just to give one example from outside of the basins that we have been discussing, that we know that some of the environmental pressures, the impacts of climate change, for example, or broader stresses and strains on water use have been associated with population displacements and migratory patterns, whether it's populations moving from a region affected by a water-related disaster, or whether it's more economically motivated migration from an area suffering water stresses that are rendering rural livelihoods more difficult, for example. But one country in which we see some of these migratory patterns is Nepal. And statistically, we see large numbers of men moving to urban centers in search of economic livelihoods, leaving women in the villages, in the communities, but where the women are not in turn empowered to make decisions or to participate in decisions about water management. So we need to look at the larger social and political structures and be explicit about targeting gender issues.
Thank you so much. We are at time. This has been an amazing discussion, giving me a lot to think about, and Tegan as well, I'm sure, as we work to build out our work on environment and conflict here at USIP. I just want to thank everyone again for your participation. To the audience, thank you. The questions were excellent. And we hope that this is the first in a series of events over the next year that we will hold on various aspects of water, environment, conflict, and natural resources. So please watch this space, and we'll send out more information about future events. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of your day.